want to read this special story that I'm talking about this morning from the Message version. The Philistines drew up their troops for battle. They deployed them at Soko in Judah and set up camp between Soko and Azekah at Ephes Dammim. Saul and the Israelites came together, camped at Oak Valley, and spread out their troops in battle readiness for the Philistines. The Philistines were on one hill, the Israelites on the opposing hill, with the valley between them. A giant, nearly 10 feet tall, stepped out from the Philistine line into the open, Goliath from Gath. He had a bronze helmet on his head and was dressed in armor, 126 pounds of it. He wore bronze shin guards and carried a bronze sword. His spear was like a fence rail. The spear tip alone weighed over 15 pounds. His shield bearer walked ahead of him. Goliath stood there and called out to the Israelite troops, "Why bother using your whole army? Am I not Philistine enough for you? And you're all committed to Saul, aren't you? So pick your best fighter and pit him against me. If he gets the upper hand and kills me, the Philistines will all become your slaves. But if I get the upper hand and kill him, you'll all become our slaves and serve us. I challenge the troops of Israel this day. Give me a man. Let us fight it out together." When Saul and his troops heard the Philistines' challenge, they were terrified and lost all hope. Enter David. He was the son of Jesse the Ephrathite from Bethlehem in Judah. Jesse, the father of 8 sons, was himself too old to join Saul's army. Jesse's 3 oldest sons had followed Saul to war. The names of the 3 sons who had joined up with Saul were Eliab, the firstborn, next Abinadab, and third Shammah. David was the youngest son. While his 3 oldest brothers went to war with Saul, David went back and forth from attending to Saul to tending his father's sheep in Bethlehem. Each morning and evening for 40 days, Goliath took his stand and made his speech. One day Jesse told David his son, "Take this sack of cracked wheat and these 10 loaves of bread and run them down to your brothers in the camp. And take these 10 wedges of cheese to the captain of their division. Check in on your brothers to see whether they're getting along all right, and let me know how they're doing. Saul and your brothers and all the Israelites in their war with the Philistines in the Oak Valley." David was up at the crack of dawn, and having arranged for someone to tend his flock, took the food and was on his way just as Jesse had directed him. He arrived at the camp just as the army was moving into battle formation, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines moved into position, facing each other, battle ready. David left his bundles of food in the care of a sentry, ran to the troops who were deployed, and greeted his brothers. While they were talking together, the Philistine champion Goliath of Gath stepped out from the front lines of the Philistines and gave his usual challenge. David heard him. The Israelites to a man fell back the moment they saw the giant, totally frightened. The talk among the troops was, "Have you ever seen anything like this? This man openly and defiantly challenging Israel? The man who kills the giant will have it made. The king will give him a huge reward, offer his daughter as a bride, and give his entire family a free ride." David, who was talking to the men standing around him, asked, "What's in it for the man who kills that Philistine and gets rid of this ugly blot on Israel's honor? Who does he think he is anyway, this uncircumcised Philistine, taunting the armies of God alive?" They told him what everyone was saying about what the king would do for the man who killed the Philistine. Eliab, his older brother, heard David fraternizing with the men and lost his temper. "What are you doing here? Why aren't you minding your own business, tending that scrawny flock of sheep? I know what you're up to. You've come down here to see the sights, hoping for a ringside seat at a bloody battle." "What is it with you?" replied David. "All I did was ask a question." Ignoring his brother, he turned to someone else, asked the same question, and got the same answer as before. The things David was saying were picked up and reported to Saul. Saul sent for him. "Master," said David, "don't give up hope. I'm ready to go and fight this Philistine." Saul answered David, "You can't go and fight this Philistine. You're too young and inexperienced, and he's been at this fighting business since before you were born." David said, "I've been a shepherd, tending sheep for my father. Whenever a lion or bear came and took a lamb from the flock, I'd go after it, knock it down, and rescue the lamb. If it turned on me, I'd grab it by the throat, wring its neck, and kill it. Lion or bear, it made no difference. I killed it. And I'll do the same to this Philistine pig who is taunting the troops of God alive." God who delivered me from the teeth of the lion and the claws of the bear will deliver me from this Philistine." Saul said, "Go, and God help you." Then Saul outfitted David as a soldier in armor. He put his bronze helmet on his head and belted his sword on him over the armor. David tried to walk, but he could hardly budge. David told Saul, "I can't even move with all this stuff on me. I'm not used to this." And he took it all off. Then David took his shepherd's staff, selected 5 smooth stones from the brook, and put them in the pocket of his shepherd's pack, and with his sling in his hand approached Goliath. As the Philistine paced back and forth, his shield bearer in front of him, he noticed David. He took one look down on him and sneered, "A mere youngster, apple-cheeked and peach-fuzzed." I like this translation. The Philistine ridiculed David. "Am I a dog that you come after me with a stick?" And he cursed him by his gods. "Come on," said the Philistine, "I'll make roadkill of you for the buzzards. I'll turn you into a tasty morsel for the field mice." David answered, "You come at me with sword and spear and battle axe. I come at you in the name of God of the angel armies, the God of Israel's troops whom you curse and mock. This very day God is handing you over to me. I'm about to kill you, cut off your head, and serve up your body and the bodies of your Philistine buddies to the crows and coyotes. The whole earth will know that there's an extraordinary God in Israel. And everyone gathered here will learn that God doesn't save by means of sword or spear." Remember this next. The battle belongs to God. The battle belongs to God. He's handing you to us on a platter. That roused the Philistine, and he started toward David. David took off from the front line, running toward the Philistine. David reached into his pocket for a stone, slung it, and hit the Philistine hard in the forehead, embedding the stone deeply. The Philistine crashed, face down in the dirt. That's how David beat the Philistine, with a sling and a stone. He hit him and killed him. No sword for David. Then David ran up to the Philistine, stood over him, pulled the giant's sword from its sheath, and finished the job by cutting off his head. When the Philistines saw that their great champion was dead, they scattered, running for their lives. The men of Israel and Judah were up on their feet, shouting. They chased the Philistines all the way to the outskirts of Gath and the gates of Ekron. Wounded Philistines were strewn along the Shearim road all the way back to Gath and Ekron. After chasing the Philistines, the Israelites came back and looted their camp. David took the Philistine's head and brought it to Jerusalem, but the giant's weapons he placed in his own tent. Facing your giant. Have any of you ever seen a movie called Facing the Giants? Christian movie? It's a wonderful movie. It's great. Have you ever faced a giant in your life? Have you ever faced a giant in your life? Some real big obstacle, some huge problem. I know many of us have. And stories like this give us cheer and give us encouragement. But let's think about this here. Get my clicker going. How do you fight a giant? How do you fight a giant? Okay? Thinking now in spiritual terms. Think about this. Every giant has a soft spot. What was the soft spot for Goliath? It was right here, up on the bridge of the nose. We have to know our strengths and weaknesses. I remember that many years ago, and the Barbs will remember this, and some of the other Hagerstown members will remember that when I arrived at Hagerstown Church, there was a lot of pastors that were interviewed for the job, but they wouldn't take it because the church was $800,000 in debt. At the time, the brand new building had just been finished. Pastor Rosenberg took a call somewhere else, and they were looking for a pastor. Well, it's not me that did it, but we got our heads together, and we got it done, and we paid it off in 5 years because we hired a special consultant to get us through a fundraising campaign, and it worked. So it was a huge obstacle at the beginning, but the Lord took care of it. We have to know our own strengths and weaknesses. We have to know what our possibilities are. We have to understand principles of spiritual warfare, offense and defense. I'd like to have us turn to Ephesians chapter 6. In any contest, whether it be simple game of tennis or ping pong or whatever it is, or real war, we have to understand these two principles of offense and defense. And Paul tells us, starting in verse 10 of chapter 6, "Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on" what? "The whole armor of God." And what is that? "That you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil." This is a spiritual warfare and requires spiritual armor. "We do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers." These are unseen powers, by the way. "Against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. Therefore take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. Stand therefore, having girded your waist with truth." Remember, truth is important. Don't ever discount the importance of truth. Very, very important. "Put on the breastplate of righteousness." So your spiritual knowledge of the truths of the Bible, your experience with Jesus and his righteousness, the robe that he has given you, "having shod your feet with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Above all, taking the shield of faith, with which you'll be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked one." Up to now is defense, protection of ourselves. "Helmet of salvation, and the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God." And that is offense. That's our offense. "Praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, being watchful to this end with all perseverance and supplication for all the saints." So we have the story, and we know that God is very willing to give us this armor. All we have to do is accept it. It's the armor that David wore into battle. It's not the armor that Saul offered him, but rather it's the spiritual principles of victory, and we have to know our weapons, and we have to have a backup plan. What was David's backup plan? What was David's backup plan? He had extra stones. That's right. And it seems that he aced it on the first shot, and God was controlling that, I'm sure. So, but he had the backup plan just in case. I'd like to have us turn to Hebrews chapter 4. We have to understand these weapons that God has given us. In Hebrews chapter 4, these are the words that we read. We're going to start in verse 12. "For the word of God is living and powerful, and sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even to the division of soul and spirit, and of joints and marrow, and is a discerner of the thoughts and intents of the heart. This is the sword of the Spirit." You have one probably in your hand or close by. This is the protection that God has given us. We have recently in our family heard of many things that are going on out there in the spiritual world. And we know that one Catholic friend believes that Catholicism is going to win the world. And there is an alliance, in a way, between Catholicism and Islam. Did you know that? Because the Islams also hold Mary in high reverence. And this very well could be a bridge between these two huge, huge powers. So we don't know what the future holds, but there's kind of a clue there perhaps. So David had a backup plan, and we need a backup plan. And this is always our backup plan, no matter what the situation. So what are the 5 stones that we need for ourselves? We need courage and faith. Now, I kind of see the experience of this church as the elephant in the room that has been troubling things here. But we need to move forward. We need to move forward with faith and courage, face it unafraid in God's armor, claim the promises of God. Goliath sneered at David, but David didn't sneer back. He just got to work. He just got to work. I had a wonderful experience several months ago. I bought this Bible at the Mountain View camp meeting a year ago, and my old Bible very falling apart and everything. But all the things, when you've had a Bible for like 50 years like I had, so many things underlined and so many notes and things. And so I started in and I transferred all that stuff to my new Bible. What a wonderful experience. All these Bible promises. Oh, it brought so many wonderful things to my mind. And then all my notes in the back of how to handle special situations and deal with special theological questions. Well, courage and faith. Practice on smaller giants. How about that? Tell me, was this the first time that David used his sling? Absolutely not. Can you imagine, picture young David out in the wilderness there with the sheep, or wherever it was, and practicing, slinging those stones at rocks or trees or hopefully not little birds, but you know how little kids do with their BB guns. Sometimes they shoot robins or whatever, and that's not right. But and then when he got his skill to that point, he could defend himself against these menaces, these lions and bear and other things that came by. I would like to give you an example. Let's say someone has a problem with smoking. Probably none of you have that problem. But where would you start? Where would you start? I'll tell you where to start. Physically speaking, give up coffee. Because there is a substance in coffee that triggers a desire to smoke. And this is also in caffeinated drinks. And a lot of times these people, they just, are wild about drinking Dr. Pepper and all this stuff. And that's the place to start. Get them off the high sugar and the caffeine. All right, so he practiced on smaller giants. Godliness, dedication to God. This is one of your assets in the Christian life. Entire dedication and surrender to God and His will. Another thing is to have a buddy. And in the past, we don't do the 5-day plan too much anymore, but other things, similar things. But we used to teach a buddy system to help people through this difficult time. Buddy system is still a good thing, whatever the situation is. And I want to turn you now to Genesis 32. And the fifth one is pray without ceasing. Genesis 32, beginning with verse 22. And Jacob arose that night and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and he crossed over the ford of Jabbok. This is when he was getting ready to meet up with Esau. He took them, sent them over the brook, and sent over what he had. Then Jacob was left alone, and a man with a capital M, who is that? That's Jesus, wrestled with him until the breaking of day. Now when he saw that he did not prevail against him, he touched the socket of his hip, and the socket of Jacob's hip was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, "Let me go, for the day breaks." But he said, "I will not let you go, unless you bless me." And so he said to him, "What is your name?" He said, "Jacob." And he said, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, Prince of God. For you have struggled with God and with men, and have prevailed." Prevailing prayer. Prevailing prayer is a special kind of prayer. It's a prayer where we stick to it and pray and wrestle with God. I want to do something special here for the children.
the sling.
Only a boy named David, but he could pray and sing.
Only a boy named David, only a little brook. Only a boy named David, but 5 little stones he took.
And one little stone went in the sling, and the sling went around and round. And one little stone went in the sling, and the sling went around and round 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 and round. And one little stone went up in the air,
And the giant came tumbling
and the giant
down.
came tumbling
And the giant came tumbling down, came tumbling down.
Only a boy named David, only a little slave. Only a boy named David, but he could pray and sing. Only a boy named David, only a little brook. Only a boy named David, but 5 little stones he took. And one little stone went in the sling, and the sling went round and round. And one little stone went in the sling, and the sling went round and 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 round. And one little stone went up in the air, and the giant came tumbling.
And the giant came tumbling.
And the giant came tumbling, 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 tumbling,
Tumbling.
So, what or who is your giant today as you think about your own life? You know, sometimes, well, we could say identify it, see it clearly, ask God for discernment, and face it realistically. This is our counsel for you. And never, never be discouraged. And claim the promises of God. Some cases, the giant might be yourself. Sometimes we're our own worst enemy. Look at this little cartoon feature here. Ah, Pogo, the beauty of the forest, primeval, gets me in the heart. And Pogo says, it gets me in the feet. Porcupine. And the other guy says, it is hard walking on this stuff. Of course, this is typical of some forests around here. Yep, son, we have met the enemy, and he is us. That's a famous quote from Pogo. We have met the enemy, and he is us. But notice this from 1 Corinthians. No temptation has overtaken you except such as common to men. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you're able, but with the temptation will also make the way of escape that you'll be able to bear it. Amen? And from Ellen White, through the right exercise of the will, an entire change may be made in the life. By yielding up the will to Christ, we ally ourselves with divine power. We receive strength from above to hold us steadfast. A pure and noble life, a life of victory over appetite and lust, is possible to everyone who will unite his weak, wavering human will to the omnipotent, unwavering will of God. If you are your own giant, if you are wrestling with some spiritual issue in your life, God has the solution for you.